All right, we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us at the 9th Annual Startup Boston Week. Our mission at this conference is really to bring the entire startup community together across every industry, every department, every phase of your development and your funding. Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted and unbiased source and guide to the best resources that can help you start and scale your startup. I'm Jeremy Brown. I'm an investor and an advisor, and I'm your host today. Now, before we dive in, I want to give a huge thank you to Suffolk University, who has graciously donated this space to us this week. They've been a partner for the past 3 years and have provided great support every one of those years. If anybody's interested in exploring their entrepreneurship programs or some of their other offerings, really encourage folks to talk to the people at the desk out the door there. They do a lot within the community, and there's opportunities to both support existing students as well as learning for yourselves. Now I'm going to get out of the way and let probably one of the best named sessions that we have get started here, and thank you all for coming.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Meyer. It's great to meet you all. Thank you so much for coming here and being here for our session, Boss Mode, Leveling Up Your Leadership as You Scale. And I've had the absolute pleasure of getting to know Michael, Teresa, and Joe as we got ready for this panel today. So hopefully it's going to be a lively discussion. You're going to learn a lot about their backgrounds, a lot about their experience, and hopefully take away some nuggets that will help you as you level up your leadership and step into, whoa, is that now too loud? Step into boss mode. Cool. Okay. So all feeling out the technology. I'll introduce myself, and I have a couple questions for you all. Then the panel is going to introduce themselves. So as I mentioned, I'm Julie Meyer. I am currently the founder and principal at an organization called Connection 151, which is a go-to-market strategy and sales coaching business. But my background had been in starting specialized consulting firms in the food space, in the leadership space, and in the mentoring space. And I'm also I am a lecturer and adjunct over at Northeastern University in both undergrad and the MBA program. So I love talking about all this kind of everything related to this: startups, leadership, growing your businesses, being successful, connecting with your most valuable customers, and making an impact. So before I introduce the panel, just quickly, just like a show of hands, like how many people here are actual bosses? How many people are leading teams? Okay. How many people are founders but not yet with a team? Okay. And how many people are none of the above? Okay, great, awesome, that's great, that's helpful. So we do have a lot of current leaders. So as we're going through the panel, please feel free to have in the back of your head what kind of questions you may have for our panel. We'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the session. So without further ado, I will stop talking. So I would love our panelists to introduce themselves. But a little fun question before you get into the nitty-gritty is if you could have breakfast with one leader, alive or past, who would it be, and what would be one question you would ask? So if you could answer the question and then go ahead and introduce yourself, and starting over there with you, Michael.
Ooh, okay. I don't have any time to think about the answer to the question. I'm on the spot. It's a good leadership lesson in and of itself.
You never know what's going to happen. You never know.
I'm going to go with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I guess the question that I would have that I could ask is this world the world that he envisioned coming out of World War II that we would all, that would exist? And how disappointed / excited would he be by where we are today?
Love it.
Okay.
And then along those lines, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. So I was a history major, undergrad. I'll start there. Thank you. I have a master's in public policy. My background is really starting from that kind of politics, policy, and communications. I started really becoming a quote-unquote boss when I ran a nonprofit in California that installed solar for low-income families and did job training to teach skills to people, workforce development program, placing people in the solar industry, people who were incarcerated, people coming out of the military from different backgrounds, and grew an organization from about a dozen people to nearly 40 people with hundreds of different trainees and coming through every year. I'm also a founder of a climate tech startup that connected consumers to incentives for electric vehicles and EV chargers that I recently did an asset sale of. And today I am doing consulting, advising startups, and just thinking about these issues and how to move forward in today's world. So that's on my mind. And I'm really happy to be here and humbled to be really around so many people that are taking leadership and trying to make it happen for themselves and for all of us. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Tribble. Who would I have breakfast with? I'm like sitting here thinking like FDR. You said something. I felt like if you could drop this mic, one should. But I'm going to go with Madam C.J. Walker, who I think, as a Black woman building a massive empire a long time ago, I'm like, I cannot imagine the things I could learn from talking to her and like hearing about her experience. I was like sitting here, I was like, who would I really love to meet? And I think it would be her.
Awesome.
Oh, and who am I? I am a serial entrepreneur at this point. I've been in early stage companies for almost 20 years, largely in biotech, consumer health, et cetera. I've been either a founder or first 10 employees of companies that have grown very rapidly. Probably most notably a company called Everlywell, which was on Shark Tank, that is now, I guess, Lori's most valuable asset that she ever has invested in from that show, and grew, in the context of this panel, grew from, I was probably employee number 10 and one of the first executives, and grew to 80 to 100 people and many multiples of revenue in a very, very short time frame, probably like 6 to 9 months. So I think if we're thinking about scaling, but then also on the biotech side of the house, I've worked with deeply technical people as a non-technical founder, and spend most of my time thinking about ways to try to help people live healthier, happier lives.
Love it. I see impact weeding through, and then over to you, Joe.
Yeah, so if I could have breakfast with someone, I've been recently reading Let My People Go Surfing by Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard. Hard to pronounce that one. I would actually ask him about this whole concept of work-life balance that everyone's been debating about for the last few years. Like, is that really a thing? And to build a huge, successful kind of business like that, but still have, the title of your book be Let My People Go Surfing. Like, how did he balance that? Accountability, work hard versus, balance in life. And I'd love to hear the thoughts on that one. A little bit about myself. So I started my first company while I was still at Northeastern. I studied mechanical engineering over there, and I had no idea what it meant to start a company. And it was actually Startup Boston, one of the first kind of educational events that I went to 10 plus years ago now that, really gave me a lot of knowledge. So a lot of appreciation to this kind of organization and this community. I ran that company for about 5 years. It was in the talent acquisition recruiting space. And now I've been at my current company, Comped, for about another 5 years, where I lead product, customer success, engineering, and I wear a lot of hats. So we've gone from about 5-ish to about 25, kind of fluctuating up and down a bit, and working with, all sorts of teams, sales, marketing, customer success, engineering, and it's been a good time. So flexing in a lot of different areas has been a good journey. Excited to share with you guys.
Love it. And you can see, I love that we have a variety of different experiences from, hundreds of employees working out and about to being in the first 10 to being on small teams. So I think we'll have hopefully something that resonates with everybody here. But let's start with the fun stuff. Let's start with mistakes we made. So we started with breakfast. We're going to go into mistakes. Then we'll go into some big picture things. But, I could probably give you a list of quite a few. Sometimes we feel like when we make mistakes, it's like, oh my God, the most tragic thing that's happened. But that's, of course, how we learn and how we grow. So what are mistakes that you made early on as a founder or leader? And what were some of the best lessons that you had over time? And I will start, I have to keep circulating around. I'll start with you, Teresa, so Michael doesn't have to get right in the hot seat again. And then we'll go with Joe and then Michael's.
Yeah, so if I think about it in the context, I've made so many mistakes, but, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not taking big enough risks. But I would say in the context of people and leading a team, some of the biggest mistake that I ever made, I think, was actually when I was in consulting. I was probably, maybe 25. I was leading my first team, and there was a person on my team who was just not pulling their weight at all. And I created a whole narrative about how this person just didn't care and this and that. And it turned out, of course, that this person's dad, I find out after the project's over, after it's been terrible, I find out this person's dad was dying of lung cancer. And she never told me. She never disclosed anything. She never told anyone in the firm. And it has always colored my leadership style and my management sense, where it's like no one wants to do a bad job. Like, I don't think anyone shows up on any given day and is like, yeah, I actually don't want to do a good job. So I think coming in to any time someone's underperforming and really being like, hey, what's going on with you as a human first, and figuring out if there's something there that would be completely explain why someone's distracted or underperforming or leaving early or coming in late or whatever. So for me, I think that's the one that I carry and try to use that.
Yeah, it is really hard to be in that position. It's harder than anybody would think.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that. Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I think this is a mistake that I kept making repeatedly in my earlier career, which is really just being the bottleneck for so many parts of the organization. I think especially when you're first starting out and you are the only person to do everything, it's really easy to keep that attachment as you start to grow and scale your business. Like even right now, overseeing 3 departments formally and some other functions, informally, there's a lot of stuff where I, for some reason, keep finding myself like people asking me to be like the final decision maker on. And I think what I've learned is like in order to truly be able to scale your own capacity in the business and kind of grow and hire, and then have people who can kind of step up in the future, you need to give people more autonomy. And not everything's going to be done, your way or the way you thought it was going to be done. Communication and boundaries and guardrails and guidance is really important. Coaching is important. But if you find yourself finding yourself in a trap where like it seems like everything I'm blocked on everything, and if I take a day off or a week off, it's like everything stops. It's kind of, you're in too deep at that point, and you kind of need to take a step back and reevaluate. So I've learned a lot. I still think it's my tendency, because I think I'm very much someone who likes to do things themselves. But knowing that is something that I'm prone to allows me to continuously reflect on that and go like, okay, do I really need to be the decision maker on this? No. Okay, let's, Mary will own this, Francisco will own this, like someone will own this. And I think that was a big learning, especially in my early career.
And you may have been in a situation with Teresa's where they're kind of shutting down, where people are shutting down, they're not doing their best work. And asking those questions with empathy allows you to even, there could be things going on in the personal life, but they could be feeling, something's preventing them from being able to step into that role as well. Yeah. So communication sounds like it's a big part of it. Michael?
Yeah, I wanted to just build a little bit on what Teresa said. How many people have heard the axiom, slow to hire, quick to fire? Right. So, there is obviously truth in it because it's a cliche, but I do think it's obviously the truth is more subtle, right? And I think that's a really good example of where better communication, right, would have done it. On the other hand, sometimes there's a thing where, like I personally, when I started, was a really soft touch. Like I loved like a heartache story from someone, and you
Your
really
dog died 6 times this week.
Crazy. But I think you have to be able to start to distinguish between what's kind of a legitimate thing in someone's life that they like a challenge for them to get over, that maybe you can help them and you can provide the patience and the sounding board, versus people that are turning your culture toxic.
Yep.
There are those people. We don't really want to talk about it because we want to think that everyone is wonderful, but we've also all been in the workplace with somebody, right? That's the person who's always talking smack, who's saying they didn't like this or that. Like, those are the people, especially I think when you're creating a culture, that are really going to be damaging to you as you go forward. And then just another quick thing I'd say, which is I'm also, as a non-technical founder, you often, especially at a smaller startup, product kind of leads, and you end up, I mean, this is like a classic also trap. The product people are always like, let's just make it better. If we only made it better, if it was just better, let's just also, again, try to make it better. And you're like, it's totally a mistake. In my judgment, having this experience.
I've never done that.
Yeah.
By himself at 3 in the morning.
What you need is product market fit. And once you have something, then you can iterate on it and make it better. But if you just sort of defer to them, and it's true, like, it can always be better, like, it can always be better. But we all know there are lots of examples of businesses that they do not have the best product, but they dominate the market. That's just something else I'd throw out there, is like not putting product totally paramount over everything. PMF matters a lot.
Especially if you're a product leader, if you're a founder, product-driven founder. At the end of the day, it's really important to think about the sustainability of the organization, not just the sustainability of your idea of the product. And how do you create a sustainable organization for everybody? Well, that's actually a good segue. We're going to talk a little bit about technical founders, since I know we probably have quite a few of those here. And I know, Teresa, you were talking a little bit about your experience coming in, working with technical teams. I don't know if you have not necessarily been the technical founder, but you've come in the very early stages. Any particular advice on those, either as technical founders who are starting to build a team, and or those coming in as leaders with technical founders?
Joe, do you want to go first, since you are the technical founder, and then I am the non-technical founder who brings the
Perfect.
technical people?
We can do a little point counterpoint.
I'm kind of in between. So I studied mechanical engineering, and I have a master's in engineering management. So for a while, I was more on the technical side, but as soon as I switched to dedicated in software, I don't know how to write code. Okay. So I've been kind of straddling between the two, and I think that's actually where I shine. My general thought, and I'm gonna, my best friend, I'm the godfather to his daughter. Like, he's also still my head of engineering. He was my previous co-founder. So I'll just say it, out loud. His name is Francisco. Francisco is like the best technical engineer, I've ever worked with. He's so brilliant. He's so smart. And some of our greatest frustrations with each other was when I was trying to push the business agenda and he was trying to push the technical agenda. And I think earlier in our working relationship, like, me basically kind of shutting his technical side down, like, that doesn't matter. The tech, that doesn't matter. Like, the scalability, the security doesn't matter. We just need to close deals. We need sales in order to have the company survive. That can make someone really shut down and get them demotivated. So I think that's like one thing to really be conscious of, especially if you're more on the go-to-market side. Like, you might know that, hey, we have 6 months of runway, and if we don't close these investors or these deals, our company's dead. So I don't care about technical debt. That's going to hit us in a year or two. That being said, you can't steamroll your technical folks like that, because at the end of the day, that's like also the lifeblood of your company. Yeah. So I'll say from kind of that perspective, it's like making sure your engineers, whoever's technical, really, really feel heard, no matter like, what state the business is in. Like, and the one other kind of nuance there is, don't think that technical folks don't have good insights and opinions about the business side as well. They are very smart people. Don't dismiss them there. So I'd say those are a couple points that come to mind.
Teresa.
So I am not a technical founder. I was an English major and I have an MBA. But I have worked really hard to be, fluent in the technologies that I am developing. So I'm often confused as someone who has a PhD or something like that, because I will read all the scientific papers required. And so most recently, I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Droplet Biosciences, which is located in Cambridge. and is using lymphatic fluid as a source of biomarker information to improve cancer patient care. And I co-founded that company with one of the leading head and neck surgeons in the U.S. and a guy that I describe as a radiation oncologist by day and a genomics pioneer by night, because he spans a very broad gamut of, clinical medicine to machine learning and things like that. So the way that I proceed with on a co-founder level is asking a lot of questions. And sometimes by asking questions, you can start to demonstrate that you're bringing a different type of expertise to the table, and you allow others to share their expertise. I think the types of companies that I like to build tend to be somewhat technical, but we never lose sight of so what. And so that's what I think I uniquely bring to those groups, is understanding why the technology matters, but also why do we care for normal people? What are they going to get out of it? And sometimes that can be difficult, I think, as Joe's saying, because you're like, hey, it doesn't actually have to be 100% perfect for it to really profoundly improve people's lives or the care they might be receiving. I think the other thing that I've learned, I think particularly working with my last CSO, we would have these moments where I'm a highly intuitive person. And so I would see something, we'd be having a conversation, I'd be like, oh, I get it. And then I would make some sort of 6-level leap to some other place. And she's like, I love you, but you've got to stop doing that. You need to help me
Yeah.
you need to articulate the 5 thoughts that must have just gone through your head that you've just assessed and made some sort of plan, because she'd be like, you're not thinking it through. And I'm like, oh no, but I thought it through, right? And so I think thinking more like the way that the people that I worked with are trained and how to communicate in an effective way with them can be really, really, I think has been helpful. Having somebody as a partner alongside me, honest enough with me to be like, yeah, this isn't working for me because my brain works in a totally different way. And in order to come with you on this journey, I need you to adjust how you're communicating your vision.
And sometimes it feels like that, sort of strengths finders work or some of these leadership things are oh, Boris Nora, but it can be really valuable to bring in those experts who can really help provide that outside perspective and facilitate that communication so that you can sort of have that groundwork laid.
Yeah, we used Enneagram for that, which I think was actually pretty helpful.
Yep.
That's cool. I just have a very basic tip that I got from an investor that was a little bit of an aha moment for me, which is just if you're a single founder who's out there and you're non-technical and you're going to create a product that is software, your technical founder has to code. That was the tip, because otherwise you're raising money just to going out the door to pay somebody else to code. So your runway is totally shorter. So you really, if you're gonna try to bootstrap it as a team, the two of you or whatever, you want to have the coding capacity in-house. Obviously that's changing now. It makes it almost even easier to do that. But just as a short, I would highly recommend that.
And then it really plugs you into both sides of the business, I think, as well. If you have somebody who's a founder with you in that space. This wasn't one of sort of initial questions, but it kind of came up through everything that you all were discussing. I very much focused on the words and the language and the script. Are there words or phrases that you've used either with your founders or with your teams or with people when you're kind of, you are seeing signs that you're approaching a difficult conversation, or there has to be a moment where we can't just kind of keep pretending that everything's okay? Are there phrases or words that you typically use to get to where everybody is ready to have that conversation? I'm asking for a friend. Go ahead.
I mean, I think one thing I learned that stuck in my head was that it's oft, rather than asking why, which can often come off, I think, as why would you do that? And how many of us love getting that question? Even though that's what you're thinking in your head. You're like, why would you do that? That's how did you do that? And what is this? How? And kind of getting them to talk about it and just trying to be, I think, less, I guess we underestimate as leaders sometimes how judgmental we can come across when we're having those conversations. And so really being sensitive about that, you want to talk about that issue, absolutely, and you should be able to. But if you are sort of putting somebody on their back heels it's not probably going to be the type of conversation and the type of follow through that you'd like to see. So I think it's like being artful. Hey, how did you come up with that? Walk me. I'd love to understand your thinking there. Is a lot better than why would that be the case?
Yeah. Help me understand. What about you, Joe? You have anything?
I have a book that I would actually universally recommend to any like earlier managers, but also more seasoned one. It's called The Leader Lab, and it's by an organization called Life Labs, which is where I learned a lot of like core fundamental kind of manager skills, and there's a lot of things in the toolkit. Like it's really, I think, like I gift this to anyone who's a relatively new manager, so Leader Lab. But one of the things in particular in that book is just like it talks about playing things back to people. Like there's so many times where like frustration stems from just simple misunderstanding and miscommunication, and then the more heated things come, the more kind of tension. It's like the more you guys aren't, you're not picking up what I'm putting down, like all this stuff. So like something that I just kind of have on repeat in my mind is like, if I'm understanding you correctly, you just told me X, Y, and Z. And then sometimes I go like, no, absolutely not. That is not what I meant. And then you kind of, you repeat, you get clarity. And I think it feels a little bit annoying at first to have to like constantly like rehash what someone just told to you. But like, whatever you're hearing sometimes through your own filter, you might be processing differently. So especially for something more complex or nuanced or sensitive, I find that just like playing it back to the person is just super helpful.
And Life Labs has great free webinars. You have tons of free
Yep.
webinars, and it's a great organization. Go ahead.
I think to build on that, some people really need to read things. And so not just rehashing things verbally, but also writing things down. If you've had a conversation, and it can be on a personal level, I mean, HR may tell you not to do that sometimes depending on what it is, but if you're talking about, strategy or performance or things like that, I think sometimes like rehashing it in writing allows people to be like, wait, I didn't quite read it that way, or they're like, whoa, what is this thing? So I think that can be helpful too. I was going to suggest you made a suggestion, Joe, so I'm going to suggest Crucial Conversations, which is a very famous classic book about how to have tough conversations with people. But one of the things that I always, there's a song I'll sing, and with the team, which is kind of just like, this is why I love multifunctional teams, cross-functional teams are the best. And part of that is a lighthearted way of reminding everybody that we all come at our problems as a company from the training that we have, and each person is bringing something important to the table. I work in very highly regulated industries. I do not have the right personality to be somebody that's going to make sure that our quality management system is going to get through the FDA. But you know what? If I do not have the kind of person that lights up their day, who is excellent at their job, who may have a very different vibe from me, if they're not great at their job and not bringing that perspective and the parts of their personality that make them excellent at that, like we're not going to get where we need to go. So I do that sometimes to remind myself, but also to remind the rest of the team, because you'll see those conflicts at intersections, marketing and sales, all the natural places where there's tension. Those tensions are natural, they're good, and you can work with them in a productive way.
Having everybody and everything, these perfect, easy conversations, just to your point, if you haven't made mistakes, you haven't really tried hard enough. So if every conversation is great and everybody's happy, you are dead.
I think also, I also think, given that this is partially about as you scale, I think that people can understand your intent better when there are 5 of you around the table and you're brand new. As you continue to grow, you have to, one, do more things in writing. You actually have to communicate the thing that you're trying to communicate many, many times. It's just like you're effectively marketing to your organization if you're really trying to communicate the big ideas. And so you have to do the things over and over again and get to a place where everybody can articulate like either what the North Star is or whatever it is that you're trying to get out there has to be done in a much more scalable way, and it will be less personal to you and needs to be propagated through the org.
Were you going to say something? And again, internal comms, like leadership training, is like, oh God, we need like an internal, depending upon your size, an internal comms person is going to save you a lot of money in the long run. So I have a question. So as founders, as you are identifying where you have actually kind of peaked in terms of your skill sets, like you have gotten as far as you can get with this particular area, how do you know when that happens? And how do you know when to bring in like the next rung of people. Do you have a moment, or did you have a moment, maybe you could describe, where you were like, okay, I've now nailed this piece of the business. I feel like I'm gonna start with you, Joe. And now I actually really need to either elevate myself to an executive level, I need to really understand this other part of the business, I need to shift my role.
Yeah, so when I first joined Compt, I led all of customer success and product, and engineering also rolled up into me. I was the only person on the customer success side of the house. So every support ticket, every implementation, every customer question, all of that funneled into me. My first thing is I need to build out a team. I can't be answering like support tickets 24/7 because then I can't be strategic and kind of so on and so forth. So really my first, I'd say 2.5 years at Compt was building out, a customer success team where my head of customer success now, her name is Mary, and then also building out the engineering side with, Francisco is my head of engineering, to where they could operate almost autonomously with very little input from me on anything that was like kind of like a day-to-day function. If it was like, hey, critical customer issue, or like, there's an outage, or like we're having trouble prioritizing, yeah, let's kind of bring that and let's have a discussion. And like it sounds like I'm kind of like trying to push them away almost, but it was almost like I had to consciously be like, no, you don't actually have to ask me for input here. No, don't ask me for input here. And I had to keep saying that over and over again. And like, I think around late 23 probably, I reached a point where I'm like, no one's asking me for anything like on like this kind of day-to-day basis thing. I was like, it's kind of quiet around here. And I remember saying to my CEO, like, is there other stuff you want me to tackle or whatever? She's like, you know what, like that's a really good time. Now you can be a lot more strategic. You can think about, our next round of funding or our exit strategy. You can think about our partnerships. And like, she's like, it wasn't like a good or bad thing on timing, but she's like, you are now at the point where you can really zoom out. And at first it felt uncomfortable. I felt like very detached from like the day-to-day stuff of the business. But like over these last kind of 1.5, 2 years now, I'm just like, wow, I'm making impact in so many different ways, because I'm not like, oh, this customer's renewal date is next week. Like they have a price increase. How's that going to go? Or like this feature's design looks kind of like, is this the right blue? Like I shouldn't think about that anymore. And part of it feels weird because I grew up, my parents owned a deli in New York City. And there was no job beneath us, right? Was what I was taught. Like, you clean the floors, you throw out the garbage, you do all this. And that was so instilled into me at an early age. I'm like, I was still like 2 years ago, I wanted to jump in on support tickets. But like, I had to kind of let all of these things go so that I can be like, oh, like the day-to-day stuff is settled. And I think that was like a very definitive moment for me. So it does happen.
It's huge.
But
It's
yeah.
huge. You're thinking of keyboard cat, right? The
Yeah.
keyboard cat is
Yep.
just like going like this, and it's like, okay, eventually you have to stop.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would just say sometimes you kind of start something and you're like, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z, and then you kind of get there, and now you sort of are like, okay, now we're just kind of fulfilling the thing, right? And maybe at least for my personality, then it starts to get a little boring at that point. And so sometimes you just are like, great, like these things happen. We're now at this place. Maybe I'm not really an ops guy. I'm more of like a vision guy, and it's time for me to go because I think this is like I fulfilled that, and that's okay. You don't have to stay at the same place forever trying to twist it into whatever is your vision of the moment. It's okay, and I think if you've done a good job, if to Joe's point, like you've trained people up, they've filled those roles, and they frankly don't even really need you to do it. I mean, there are people I started working with who had like, let's say, never done a government meeting. Years later, they're applying for grants, they're getting millions of dollars, they're building programs like nationally, they're doing all this stuff, and it's like they're better at it than I think I am now because they had the sort of, you gave them the exposure, then there's the delegation, there's a sort of phase where you're doing it together, and then there's the phase where you're like, great, I'm here if you need me, and then there's the phase where you're like, you really don't need me. I'm gonna move on to the next challenge.
And they tell you to go away.
Yeah, that's
leave
when
me
you go
alone.
away. But it's sort of like, I forget what the pithy phrase is, but it's sort of like, if you do it right, you kind of work yourself out of the job.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do.
Teresa, anything to add there?
I would say that that makes a ton of sense. If we're thinking about when to shed responsibilities, I tend to do these time audits like once a quarter. This makes it sound like I'm way more formulaic and organized than I actually am, but I'll get to a point often where I'm doing things and I'm like, wait a minute, how am I actually spending my time this week? And is that helping me fulfill what I view as, as a founding CEO, as sort of the three things I'm supposed to do, which is set the vision, build the team, and fund the business. Because I'm typically doing things that require a lot of venture capital. And so I will do that. And then I strongly recommend finding yourself an executive assistant who, even if it's like first at 10 hours a week, who has no filter to be like, you should not be running payroll. You should not be doing, what are all the, the
Booking your
things that
hotels and-
like you shouldn't be booking your own hotels, and you shouldn't be looking up the email addresses or, the LinkedIn profiles of the people you're going to meet for the next 3 weeks or whatever it is. But there are so many things that you do because you're like, it just takes a minute, that actually can take you away from making the business as successful as it can be. So I think keep that in the back of your mind, like every so often, just take a step back, look at your calendar if you use them, and be like, what am I actually spending my time on? And is that the highest and best use of me? I think that's one thing. I think the other is, when you're thinking about you're bumping up against your own limitations as a leader. I have had the best CEOs I've worked for have all had great executive coaches. I have a great executive coach who I think, we haven't talked about, but being a founder, even if you have co-founders, can be very lonely, particularly if you've taken the CEO seat and you're now effectively managing your co-founders. And so you have a board, you may have investors, and I think that is a place where finding either a CEO peer group that you can work with, which I also have and recommend, where we meet, once a month for a few hours and sort of, share challenges and opportunities and growth and learnings, but also having an executive coach, like, the best people know that they need support, and so don't look at that as a shortcoming. It's really an opportunity for you to rise to the next level.
I love that. Actually, I was going to ask you, Michael and Joe, what kind of resources you have. I know you mentioned some books, and you mentioned, kind of peer groups as well as coaches. And I love that idea of like, who's reflecting to you, like it's time for you to move on. Like, who do you kind of surround yourself with? Is there any other?
No, I mean, I think those were great points. Having some time management candor from somebody on your team is great. I really do think that however you can get a peer group of people, it is lonely to be the boss. Nobody cares, because of the way it is. Or people aren't like, oh, the boss is having a tough day, like you, and you have to be strategic about, like, you're not going to vent to your board members. They might say to you, like, come tell me, like, how, like, I'm here for you. But like that, quickly you would be like, okay, maybe that's not, no, like I shouldn't talk to them about that. And you really want to be in a peer group or with a coach. I think the peer group thing's awesome because you get to say, hey, I have this problem. Have you ever experienced this problem? And they're like, yep, this is how I did it. Or this is my thoughts. I think that's just so critical for getting strategic help, tactical help, and also just as you say, like that feeling of like, I'm not this weird, one person with the world on my shoulders. I'm actually just, there's lots of other people in the same position as me.
And it helps, I think, to also share your experience with somebody that feels good for you too. I think just being of service to other people is helpful too in those
absolutely.
kind of conversations, like you being able to share that. What about you?
I'll add just one quick thing. Like when, I don't know what everyone's financial situation is. When I was graduating and starting my own company, like a coach, any paid community, that was out of the question. Like even like a few months ago, someone's like, hey, you want to join this like super special executive community? It only costs $12,000 a year. And I'm like, nope, like I'm not interested in that right now. I got daycare bills, I got all this stuff. What I found super helpful early on is Slack communities. There are so many Slack communities for very different like niche areas. Like there was a customer success leaders one that I joined early on. There's, I'm a big fan of Lenny's podcast and newsletter on the product and growth side. There's occasional meetups on that one. There was like an HR community, like Boston People Ops people or something like that. And like all these little communities have their own little virtual or in-person meetups that like you start to build your own pockets of like, hey, for like product stuff, I go here. For engineering stuff, I go here. So like, that's like a really good, mostly free way to like establish a sense of community when you're like the only functional person in a certain area. And then like definitely look at like things like Eventbrite, Meetup, Luma, for like what's around Boston. I think we were just chatting about this, like the Boston tech ecosystem, I would actually say was a lot more busy with tons of events pre-pandemic, but I think we're having a comeback. Things like this are, really important. Like look out there for events that are like, and even if you're nervous, like, oh, I don't know if I'd fit in here, just go. Like people who go to events are there to meet people. Like, so don't like hold yourself back and be like, oh, like I'm an early founder. Like maybe I'm not at the same level as them. Just go. Like you'll usually build some really good connections and at least have good conversations. So yeah.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
My CEO peer group is free, by the way. And
Okay.
let me tell you
Good.
how it came together so that you can think about it for yourself. So I was on the board of a company, the chief commercial officer left, and he became a CEO for the first time. I then left and became a CEO, like really for the first time. And he was like, I'm going to put together a group of people. I'm going to invite 8 people that I know who are in the same boat and see if they want to get together on Friday mornings. And it's been amazing. Yeah. So like you can do this, if you go to the events and you do the things and you meet some people who are either in your function or also founders or whatever, and they resonate with you, just be like, hey, do you want to get on Zoom or meet in person, for an hour and see what happens? We've been doing it for 2 years and it's like, I do not miss that meeting.
Well, the good news is the session ends at 3:30, and there will be, if you want to meet, go on over there in the corner. I'm just kidding. But if you want to go in the corner, it's like we have a lot of group of people here who are probably all in similar boats. So if you want to get together, this is exactly the best kind of event to do this in. So I think we'll go ahead and open it up to questions, since I imagine I'm going to defer to these folks. If you have a question, please raise your hand. There's one in the back over there. Jeremy, behind you, over there. Or somebody. Yep.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Sagar. I run For Fish. I have a question actually for a friend of mine who's not attending the event. They wanted me to ask. One thing about scaling and one thing about growing as a leadership, in part with leadership, is preparing for the eventuality. If you can't grow well enough, you will get replaced.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for them?
You can't grow as a leader, or that the organization won't?
As in, like you.
Will go away.
As in, like you might be replaced as the CEO, as the leader of the company, based off the investors or stuff like that.
Got it. You might
They're
not be the
worried
right
about that for
person
themselves.
to take to the next level.
Yes.
Does anybody have experience or thoughts on that?
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
I mean, I think this is almost like, I don't really exactly know how to answer this because it feels a little bit like very specific to the situation and to the person, right? It's kind of like sometimes you reach a point where you're like, all good things come to an end. Like it's time to leave, right? Like I don't know, but it's Boston. Like most of us are sports fans, right? And it's like, you don't expect the person to be in the same thing, doing the same thing forever. There's a time where you realize like, maybe things have changed. You've changed and things have changed. So I think there's just some personal work about accepting that. But I guess having an honest appraisal, talking to people that you trust, talking to your colleagues, talking to your board, and I think it's okay. The thing is like you don't have even if you're the founder of something, if you get it to a certain point, you really might not be the right person to be the leader at that point, and that's probably okay. It's one thing to found a company and scale it to a certain point. You might not be the person to take it to an IPO. You might not be the person to lead it after an IPO. And that's totally okay. I mean, I feel like you've seen this more up close.
Yeah. I mean, there's a point, and I think if your friend were here, what I would say is I'd be like, what do you like doing the most? Mm-hmm. And you may find, and I have found, that there is a point where the things I need to do, the majority of what I need to do on a daily basis isn't actually what lights me up, isn't what I think uniquely I bring to any situation that I'm in. So there's a point, and I think you only realize this after you get over your ski tips or whatever the saying is, and you've gone past that point. And so for me, like when I was at Everlywell, I mean, we were growing so fast. That company was based in Texas. I was here. I basically succeeded myself out of a job in the sense that I had to leave because I was on the road 90% of the time. And I couldn't move to Texas for personal reasons. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. But also, I figured out how to sell the product. I've done the first deals, all the B2B. I've, landed us in Target and CVS, and I did these deals with these big insurance companies. And now it's just rinse and repeat. And it's boring. So, like, for me personally, like, other people would love it. So I think, like, that's one thing. I think but I think anyone who particularly has taken outside investment and has a board, I always tell people, like, look, there's really only a couple ways as a CEO that you leave your role. Like, you can choose to leave because you're like, I want to go do something else. But most of the time, you're probably going to get asked to leave. And you just have to be prepared for that. Most people don't run the whole race.
There's a word that I've been working with a lot and talking about resources. One of the best leadership books I read, especially for new leaders, is called The Unexpected Leader by Jacqueline M. Baker, who is somebody that I work with. And we're really working on normalizing the word legacy.
Oh, I like that.
And so helping leaders to identify their legacy when they start. What do they want to leave here? Mm-hmm. What is the legacy of them in this organization? And then helping them when it's time to start thinking about, like, okay, now I left my organization that I'd founded after 13 years and, grew to 8 figures, and it was great. And it was like, okay, what's the legacy I'm leaving? I've done everything I can do. So really planting that seed, and even ourselves as leaders reflecting on what kind of legacy do we want to have at this organization? And then what kind of legacy do we want to leave in the world after this? Because our jobs are great and our companies are great, but there's more that we can do. And starting to help people really see that and just normalizing that kind of conversation, I think, is my 2 cents. Anything you want to add?
No, I'm staying in my company forever in my current
good.
role. No one's kicking me out.
It's okay, Joe. You can call us when you need to.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll come up with something good for you to do. We'll go back to the deli. Don't worry. Like, there's always going to be a need for
no.
AI won't replace that. Okay, in the back.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. Joe, I really resonated with what you're saying about, like no task beneath you and having that work ethic. As a startup founder myself for a tech company called Paradise, I sometimes do struggle with that. And the way I justify it is like, by doing it myself, I'm not only like, saving the company some money, but also, this is what I got to do. So how do you make the decision from like trying to do everything yourself versus, as scaling, like hiring someone else to do it or delegating it to someone else? Like, how do you make that trade-off? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll use like very specific examples. So I don't write code, and I'm not a product designer by kind of trade or education or anything like that. Early days when I was designing kind of like our web app, I was legitimately using Google Slides to mock up websites because I didn't know how to use Figma or Illustrator, all these different tools. And I just kept punting on hiring a dedicated designer because I was like, I'm getting the job done. It's good enough. Like, I'm saving the company like, $120,000 to not hire a dedicated product designer. And I realized that it was taking me so long to get like these prototypes done because I wasn't the right experience for it. And then I was like, now I'm kind of dropping the ball on some of these go-to-market responsibilities. Now I'm kind of like not really using my strengths as like a product leader and a go-to-market person because I just spent 6 hours trying to move boxes around on Google Slides.
Yeah.
So I think when you're running into a point where you're like, this is actually not a strength of mine, and I actually don't want it to be a strength of mine. I don't want to be a product designer or product design leader. I don't want to be, an engineering leader moving forward. And I find myself kind of doing a lot of that stuff. That's when I'm like, what are my options for doing less of this? Sometimes you're not in a position to hire. You're not in a position to outsource. I completely understand that. But there might be a hard decision to just let the ball drop on some of these areas. Like, you know what? Like, I'm actually, there was a weird, awkward phase where I didn't hire a designer yet, but I didn't want to do design anymore. And I was like, hey, you know what, engineers? figure it out. Like, here's the requirements, like, make it look as good as you can, and until we hire a designer. And that was a really tough decision, because at first they were like, oh my God, like, you're making us design? Like, we're even worse than you. I'm like, it'll be good enough. And I think that's like, when you're not in a position where you can just hire or outsource out, the conscious act of saying, I'm gonna let this fire burn is like such a hard decision to make. But I think that's like one that you're gonna have to repeat over and over again. There's one little thing to add on. Someone very early on in my career told me, like, as a founder, as an executive, think about your time as worth $500 an hour, you know, like, and think about, like, is it actually worth it for me to do this? Like, you know, so on and so forth. Like, is that worth it? And like, if you act like that, you'll start to filter things out a little bit more appropriately.
Yeah.
I would just also say, if you're in the beginning of this, it's all about efficiency, right? And we live in a world now where so many roles can be filled fractionally or on a contract basis. Like, early on in our company, realistically, we had 3 people working full time, and everything else was contract job, this, that, everything. Obviously, you think of, the bookkeeping or accounting, of course, or the legal, but even like design, even these different things, like, and you can also, you really get into like, how bad am I? Like, would a design student do better than me? Would somebody in Romania on Fiverr for $50 do better than me? The answer is probably yes. They're probably going to do a lot
Definitely
better than you
Google's
if this
fault.
isn't
Yeah.
your.
And I'm sure they were great. But
not their
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
And so it really is like probably a better use of your time to manage half a dozen contractors who you find who are efficient, who are just going to do the thing. Because we all know it's like, hey, it's going to take me 6 hours to do that. This is going to take them 25 minutes.
Yep.
Because this is what they do. They're great at it. I suck at it. Let me pay them. That's how an economy works, and it makes sense, right? And I think, even though absolutely, to the gentleman's point there, you never want to be like, oh, I don't want to get my hands dirty with that. I'm too good for that. That's a terrible attitude. And there's plenty of stuff you're going to have to do as a founder that is in that bin. But if you find that like someone is spending, you're spending like days upon days on this thing that damn well somebody else could do in a couple hours, you're making a mistake. You are making a mistake there, and you don't need to hire someone full time.
And I think when you settle into your role, you're really showing your team that it is important that you stay in your role, and that you're, you are leading, and that probably gives them more confidence than seeing you, doing everything. We don't have a ton of time left, but we do have time for a few more questions. Great. Hi.
So kind of from a personal experience, so I've got a startup pre-revenue. We're making some moves, and I'm sort of struggling with bringing either a co-founder or additional talent where I don't have money but can offer equity. And I guess the concern is, I see someone, I really like them, I like what they bring to the table. How do I value that in terms of the equity? And then how do you have that conversation without being, without offending the other person about sort of what they want, what you're sort of willing to give up, and things like that?
Who wants to answer?
I've had some tough conversations about this in my day. So equity is so much more art than science. You might think it's my idea, I'm the original founder, like I'm gonna keep 80-90% of this company, so on and so forth. But like, for example, using the technical, non-technical example, like if you want a super strong, I don't know if you're a technical product or a software, but like in this hypothetical, if you want to hire like a top talent engineer who's going to build the thing for you, and you do all the go-to-market side of things, or vice versa, I view that almost as a 50-50 split, like almost right off the bat, like maybe 60-40, depending on how much responsibility you're retaining. But like, I would be super generous with that. Think about your future employee stock option pool, put 20%, 30% aside for that. You're gonna get diluted, so on and so forth. But like, at least originally on, I would be a lot more generous than you think. Like my first split, when it was just me and the first co-founder at the first startup, he took 51, I took 49 because he had the original idea. Then we added the technical co-founder. We were about like a third, and with like the CEO had to have a little bit more for like future board control kind of ratios and things like that. But my general sentiment is like, if you're greedy and someone feels like they're not matched or not enough, that resentment is gonna kill your business like straight away, or at least eventually. It's going like you need to make sure that it's like super. They feel like you are almost equal partners if it's a co-founder. I've never seen a co-founder situation work where it's like CEO, like I have 80-90%, but you're a co-founder, you get 3, 4, 5. Like it doesn't feel right if you're calling yourselves co-founders. It's founding team, very different than co-founder. So
We
also
have
a distinguishing factor.
1 minute.
Okay, reading Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman.
Yep.
And my co-founders at Big Hat, which is an AI guided antibody discovery platform, we built a little spreadsheet. And it was basically like each of us, and then we had 4 phases of the business: the idea, the founding process, post-funding, and sort of like terminal. And we allocated like what were each of us bringing to the table in each of those phases. Like I got a 0 for idea. It wasn't my idea. But I did a bunch of this other stuff. And then we used that as a jumping off point to have the hard conversations about who's going to bring value where. And then we allocated like what % of value we thought would be created by each of those 4 buckets. And then we said, in each of those phases, how are we going to do that? And it has been used by lots of other people. I give it to people all the time. But it comes from that book. I don't think that they made that, but I think this is what my co-founder abstracted from it. So you can have kind of a rational conversation, because this conversation you should also not have in one day. It's going to go like day 1, and then you're like, let's break and come back and think about it, because it gets very emotional, because it's about like, what am I worth to you? And do you value me? And so it's a really tough one, but when you get through it right, it can lead to really beautiful,
And
long-lasting
they have
partnerships.
I think they have some of the tools on their website too.
Do they?
Founders
Okay, yeah.
Dilemma.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I would like hand it out to people like.
That's great.
Candy.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd just say, like, it's very typical to fall in love with the idea that you have. And I think being honest, if you actually map out and sort of how far you have to go, it's like lots of people have good ideas, and unfortunately, it's probably worth less than on its own than you think. And I'd just say a good deal is one where both people think it's a good deal. And to the point, it'll bite you in the ass later if it's too good a deal for you and not a good enough deal for them. Everybody's got to walk away being like, especially your core founding team, like, okay, I'm good. Like, this makes sense to me. You have to feel it too, obviously. So.
Well, honestly, I feel like we could chat all day. So please get to know the folks around you. Come up for questions afterwards. Thank you so much for thank you, the panelists, and thank you so much for having us here at Startup Boston. Jeremy, announcement.
Huge thank you to the panel. That was great. Let's see, a couple things. For those of you who haven't already heard me say this 4 times now, there is an ecosystem fair tonight at 6:30, where you have the chance to check out organizations that are government or accelerators, networking groups. So that's just here in the building. The next session that we have here is Inventing the Future. For those that want to stay in this area, if you don't want to use that one, the app will have the rest of the sessions and where you can find them. And if you're online, just pick your next event. And then lastly, I'll just say for Friday, for those that are in the room that are founders, since I heard a couple of those already, at the closing party, there is a chance to share your venture and your startup at the showcase. So, stop by the desk downstairs and they can give you some information on that. So really appreciate everybody's time and the engagement and the panel. That was great. Thank you.
Hey. That was really fun. That was really thank you.
You're not bothering me.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I just
You're all good.
Hi, nice to meet you.
They do. They help with it.